Hello my friends, in today's video we will be comparing Sony A7 III and A7C. The first thing that I want to say before we get to the comparison is that these are different types of cameras for different types of users. A7C is not meant to be A7 III replacement. I also don't think that one is universally better than the other. Especially the A7C is a result of market segmentation. It is not designed to be praised in internet discussions, but it will serve the target group very well, as I've explained in my review. Second of all, let's take a look at the most important stuff that these cameras have in common. Both cameras use 24 megapixel full-frame backside illuminated IMX 410 sensor. That means that the dynamic range and ISO or low light performance on both cameras is identical and very good. If you would like to find out more about the sensor performance, you can take a look at my A7C review or A7 III long-term review linked in the description. As you may have noticed, the color of the reflections from both sensors is actually different. That means that there might be different coating on the newer sensor or different low-pass filter. I have heard some claims about the improved color science on A7 III, but I will be honest, I don't really see any differences in side-by-side shots. I certainly don't mind that though. A7 III is still one of the most color-accurate cameras on the market, so there wasn't much to improve on A7C. I am generally very happy with the colors from both. The build quality on both cameras is also very similar. Both use magnesium frame and feel very solid. An advantage of A7C is that it has proper port doors. The A7 III has port covers hanging on a piece of plastic. An advantage of A7 III is that the tilting screens generally use more solid attachment, which is also the case here. Both cameras are actually weather sealed. It is not the highest degree of weather sealing, but they will survive reasonable amount of rain and high humidity. Both use E-mount of course, which is also a huge strength of both cameras. E-mount still offers the most complete lens selection, ranging from third-party budget options to exotic glass and bright telephoto primes. Another strength of both is that they use NP-FZ100 batteries. You can realistically take more than 2000 shots or 3 hours of 4K video on a single charge with both. That is still by far the best battery life in their respective classes. The battery life on A7C is a tiny bit better because of the smaller viewfinder. One thing that I haven't mentioned before is that the USB-C charging on both is pretty fast. Both can charge the battery at about 9 watts, which is above average for in-camera charging. The A7 III also has micro USB charging with the same 9 watt output. Probably the most obvious difference is that the A7 III is an SLR style camera, whereas the A7C is a rangefinder style camera. That means that the A7 III has more space for a larger viewfinder in the center of the camera. Rangefinder configuration allows the camera to be even smaller, but in this case it also means that it has a smaller viewfinder. Another difference is the size. The A7 III is already a very small camera for what it does. It only weighs 650 grams and it is super portable. The A7C takes it to another level. It only weighs 509 grams. It is difficult to describe how small it is, but I think that this iPhone comparison illustrates it pretty well. I think that Sony still doesn't get enough credit for how much technology they can pack into such small camera bodies. The A7 III is still the second smallest relevant full-frame camera, and it uses the extra size for better handling. That is the next difference that we will talk about. The main priority for A7C is the portability, which means that it sacrifices some of the control elements. The grip is noticeably shorter in comparison with A7 III. This is a highly subjective thing, so I can't really make any conclusions here. For me, the A7C is completely fine to use with small to mid-size lenses. I've also used it with some larger lenses, such as 24-70 f2.8, and it didn't really cause me any discomfort. The A7 III grip is the perfect size for me personally. That may be affected by the fact that I am used to it, but for me it is a very good compromise between the holding comfort and the body size. I actually think that the A7 III handling is great, and I am not ashamed to say that. The only thing that I miss on the A7 III is the dry mode dial. The A7C still has 2 control dials and exposure compensation dial, which is very nice. All of the necessary buttons are still here, but there is only one custom button. I definitely miss the joystick though. Regarding the autofocus, it seems that the hardware is the same in both cameras. That means 693 phase detection points and 425 contrast detection points. The software is different though. The first difference is that the A7C has real-time tracking. That allows you to track a subject by half pressing the shutter button, AF on button, or by tapping on the screen. It is very reliable and it works for both stills and video. It replaces lock-on AF on Sony A7 III. That is a bit inconvenient to use and also less reliable. A7C also has eye autofocus for both stills and video. This is super impressive technology. It is incredibly reliable, accurate, and fast. A7 III only has eye tracking for stills mode. For video, it has face tracking, which is still sufficient for the majority of situations. Another difference is that the A7 III has 3 settings for autofocus speed and 2 settings for responsiveness. The A7C has 7 settings for autofocus speed and 5 settings for responsiveness, which is now called Shift Sense. These settings are very gradual and they make a big difference. I use maximal responsiveness on both and medium speed value most of the time. I am fine with the options on A7 III, but I definitely appreciate additional settings on A7C. There are also algorithm improvements on the A7C which make the autofocus look even more natural. A7C is the best focusing camera that I've ever tested. Having said that, if the A7C autofocus is 10 out of 10, I would still give the A7 III about 9.4 out of 10. Regarding the video specs, there is just one significant change, and that is the unlimited video recording on A7C. The A7 III is limited to 30 minutes. Both shoot very detailed full sensor 4K UHD video downsampled from 6K in 24 and 25p. Both cameras have a low pass filter which prevents the moire and makes the footage look a bit less digital. The amount of rolling shutter is very acceptable on both and it can be completely removed in editing. Both cameras have in-body image stabilization rated for 5 stops. It seems that the A7C uses different IBIS unit, but the efficiency is basically the same on both. The difference is that the A7C can store gyro data, which you can use to stabilize the footage in editing. I've actually changed my opinion about that. Now I think that this might be so-called game-changing feature. The difference that it makes in this walking vlog sample is in my opinion incredible. You can also manually set how much it crops the image. Having said that, it doesn't work that well at longer focal lengths. As you can see in this sample shot at 50mm, Warp Stabilizer performs better here. I hope that Sony will work on this, and I would generally appreciate Final Cut and Premiere plugins that would utilize gyro data. The display on both uses the same panel. It is a 3-inch 921,000 dot panel. It is still fine to use and the brightness is sufficient, but the resolution is below average by 2021 standards. The difference is that the A7 III uses a tilting mechanism, whereas the A7C uses a rotating screen. As you might know, I much prefer tilting screens because of the following reasons. A7C will be used for vlogging a lot, so it has fully rotating screen, and in this case I understand this choice. At least the hinge is pretty solid, so the rotating screen is not a deal breaker for me in this case. Both A7 III and A7C also use 2.36 million dot viewfinder. The difference is that the A7 III viewfinder has 0.78 times magnification, whereas the A7C viewfinder only has 0.59 times magnification. Because the A7C viewfinder is smaller, it actually looks sharper at that resolution. It is really small though and not very pleasant to use. I definitely prefer A7 III viewfinder just because of that size, but the sharpness isn't great. There are also some minor changes in the menu. The A7C has a new graphic menu for the button setup and for the function menu setup, for example. The A7 III has dual SD card slots. That is mainly useful as a backup solution in case of SD card failure. The A7 III can write both stills and video to both cards at the same time. A7C only has one card slot. I think that it is acceptable on this type of camera. Fortunately, it is UHS 2 card slot, which significantly speeds up the whole operation. I also appreciate that the card slot is located on the left side instead of the battery compartment. The A7C also has larger buffer. It can take 45 uncompressed RAWs or 115 compressed RAWs. The A7 III can take 38 uncompressed RAWs. The last difference is the price. That is impossible to evaluate because it depends entirely on where you are buying the camera. You can check the current prices in the description. In the US, the A7C is about $200 cheaper than the A7 III, which is pretty fair in my opinion. I think that the A7C is a good value at that price. Sony A7 III will soon be 3 years old, but the official price didn't really go down just because it sells so well. So these were the main similarities and differences of the A7 III and A7C. So who should buy the A7C? I think that it is a great camera for modern content creators. It is an easy way to upgrade the image quality for APS-C and Micro Four Thirds users. It can do everything that you need for advanced YouTube production. I think that the target users of this camera won't miss the controls, dual SD cards, or 10-bit video. On the other hand, they will appreciate very compact size and rotating screen. Vlogging, streaming, and all of that stuff is the fastest growing market segment, and the A7C is an ideal camera for this niche. Besides that, it is also very appealing to serious photographers and filmmakers who simply appreciate small rangefinder cameras. It is the most convenient and inconspicuous way to carry a full-frame camera, especially in combination with a compact prime lens. The A7 III is a typical workhorse camera. It has very good controls, dual SD cards, and larger grip. It is more suitable for advanced users who use more manual settings. I would also say that it is more suitable for typical professional or commercial use. Of course, it can still be used for the same stuff as the A7C if you prefer handling over compact size and convenience. Overall, I think that both are still great cameras in 2021, and I hope that this video will help you decide which one is a better choice for you. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you have found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.